So I understand the value prop of like it'll generate something for you and you don't have to worry about it. But the problem is you're putting a ceiling on your development and your growth because you're never figuring out how to go past that. And so, great, you found the easy button. But if management sets people up the right way, they've got such a higher trajectory that they can go to.
Awesome to have you here, Will. Thanks for agreeing to be part of the Soundcheck. I feel like this has been a long time coming. Connected over LinkedIn many times. Had the fortunate opportunity to finally meet face to face, which doesn't happen often in this world at SASTA, but delighted to have you on the show. And I'm not going to introduce you. I think you'll do a much better job than I would.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. It was so good to finally actually meet in person out in London. So I'm Will Allred. If you don't know, I'm one of the co-founders at a company called Lavender. We help sales reps write better emails. We help them do it faster. And so if you are familiar with me, you might know that I post a lot on LinkedIn, sharing tips, tricks, advice on what it means to write a good email. And that's all based on the data that we see at Lavender. We see hundreds of millions of emails, bajillions of data points about what makes for a good email. And so I mix that with a split between that and really what the buyer's perspective is on the other side to help sellers be more empathetic to the person on the other end and write something that people actually want to read at the end of the day.
Love that perspective. Am I right in saying there's over 30,000 people now using Lavender? So I can imagine the data points are endless.
Yeah, it's to say the least, it's a lot. But at the same time, it's good. It's sort of allowing us to really live up to the mission of what we were trying to accomplish.
Love that. Cool. So we want to jump straight in with today's topic, which is scaling outreach. And even that word is a bit scary, like scaling. Um, has anyone ever asked you to define personalization in the current world of sales?
I personally feel like it has to be defined because right now the right now the lexicon for what equals personalization is all over the place, right? You've got some sellers out there who believe that it's as simple as like putting something in brackets and inserting into an email. You've got other sellers who believe that it can be pretty much anything specific to the individual that you're writing to. And then you have other people who, beat this drum of relevance is the only thing that matters. And like, it doesn't actually even need to be personalized. And I think at the end of the day, like a personalized email is some of those things. It's none of those things. I think of what makes for a personalized email is it creates the feel of it being one to one. It is actually written for the other individual on the other end. And it shows up with a clear purpose for why they are reaching out to that individual. And so that can be something as simple as um, it could be something as simple as like a technology that the company uses, something that you see on a company's website. It could be something as simple as the fact that they are hiring for a specific role. The challenge with doing personalization well is it has to actually serve a purpose. And that purpose is, I'm taking this information that I found in my research and I'm tying it back to a challenge that this person likely has that I can help them solve. Right. The problem with personalization is when you go too far down one path, it's, hey, I see you're a fan of the Atlanta Braves, or I don't know, you're in Europe, Manchester United, right? And it's like that so what, right? That's not personalization. I mean, technically it is personalization, but it's not good, right? Or you've got like this other, as the COO and co-founder of blah blah blah, right? Like that just like doesn't scale well at all. And so the reason people get all hot and bothered about like is it relevant is because it really does beg the question of like, why are you doing it? Now, you can't use that as like a pendulum swing and go straight into like cheaper tactics of like, okay, I'm going to build a list of people who are hiring for SDRs, because so many people can do that now that the bar of what people expect is starting to go up. And so, what I'm telling my team, what I'm telling other teams is, when you're approaching an individual, it's not just, I mean, it sometimes has to be just one observation, but ideally it's a blend of things coming together that help you create a unique point of view on the person on the other end, right? A unique point of view on that person's situation and the problems that they're likely facing, so that when you show up in your inbox, or you show up in their inbox, you create this feel that you understand where they're coming from, with a like, true sense for what the problem they might face is. And it might be something they're actively thinking about, it might be something they're not actively thinking about, but you built credibility in that moment because of the research that you showed up with.
That resonates. It shows you did your research. How did you know I support Manchester United? I didn't think I posted that all over LinkedIn. I shouldn't even be admitting that. It's embarrassing. Um,
They
and
had a nice win over Arsenal last weekend, though.
they did. Yeah, some Arsenal fans fighting in the crowd as well. Yeah, we love to see it. Um, and I guess there, like something you kind of keep touching on is personalization can come in different formats. So you're focused on me supporting Manchester United, or maybe what the business is doing and their focus and their growth and everything. So there's different sources. So it comes down to the research as like a first point, especially when it comes to outreach prospecting. I think your friend Samantha McKenna puts it well: "Show me, you know me." But
Yes.
what do you do when you can't find anything?
Yeah. I always tell folks, like, you are finding things, you just don't think you're finding things, right? What they do, who they sell to, what they've built it on. All of these things are relevant pieces of information that are unique to them, right? So, yeah, one of the classics is like, they don't post anything on social media. Well, I bet their LinkedIn profile sits there and it looks like a resume, right? At least looks like a resume. And so if that's the case, I now have a like trajectory of this person's career. I know projects they've worked on in the past. I know, what they're familiar with, what they're not familiar with. I know a lot about their mindset coming into the challenges that they might be facing in their current role. And so, while that might not be like the thing I use to craft my outreach, it could be, and it could be really potent, particularly if I use it in like, say, a PS, right? Um, a classic example would be like if a sales leader was coming from a large org and they're now moving into a small org. And so if you think about that, big orgs, more structure, more process, more procedure. So if they're going into a small org, they're probably craving that, right? And so you can speak to that, you can use that, you could talk about like the much more limited budget that they probably have, maybe less documented process around even how budgeting works, right? And those kinds of things can kind of come together to help create a narrative for where you fit into their lives.
Definitely. I saw a good stat around the PS as well, increasing reply rates by around 30%. Is that the one?
Yeah, yeah. I believe it was 35. It might have gone down a little bit, which we tend to see with any sort of like data trend in email. Is like they'll fluctuate as far as like
Mm,
potency. So like there was a stretch of time where like really really short emails were just killing it, and they still are. It's just not to the same degree, right? It used to be
mm.
like 68% more replies for an email between 25 to 50 words. Well, you beat that drum long enough, people will start to send those types of emails. And then once those types of emails start to become very commonplace, bad emails start to infiltrate those shorter emails, right? And so then you see now, instead of 68%, it's only 40%. It's still the optimal way to write an email. Um, but it's, yeah, it helps us like sort of drive the narrative of what we should be focused on and talking about. So for us, The two things that I'm like laser focused on right now, because I'm looking at the data and I'm seeing people aren't doing the things, is writing shorter, simpler subject lines and uh, truncating the sentence structures within their emails. And then the third one being personalizing their emails. So you hit on a nerve with that conversation. Like, what does it mean to personalize an email? Because 96% of emails that go out the door are automated, not personalized. And so, sellers sit there and they think to themselves, like, this email's so good, like I deserve a response to this. And like you don't realize it's buried under like, oh, like out of 100, you were one of four that actually took the time. And so people's default is just to like throw it in the trash. Um, you pair that with most subject lines right now are 5 words or more. It's the stupidest thing. Because what happens is, okay, if you're one of those four that just personalize the email, and then you write this 5 word subject line, you basically buried the lead on the fact that you personalized the note. Personalized emails are getting 1,200% more replies right now. And I bet it would be higher if more people were writing shorter subject lines.
Do you find then that this increase in personalization and the impact it has means that you don't need to have a 7, 8 step email sequence that's automated in the background and set and forget? Do you find that the actual number of touch points reduces?
So I'm a big fan of not needing that many touch points. And people like say that you're missing out on like these people that respond down the line. It's like backed by data, and like I hear that. I do. But then I also know what the data looks like from working at what I do here. And I'm like, most of the data is kind of trashy. And so like you have to like look at it with a grain of salt, right? Like if 96% of emails are automated, and then you think about most of those sequences and cadences are filled with those automated messages, of course it takes longer to get a response, right? Of course there's this like missing tailwind of replies on the other end that you're just not seeing. And so my thought process is to approach it like a buyer and be like, I get emails, I read them, I see them, I delete them, or I respond to them, right? And so like it's one of those things where like if you just practice the right behaviors, you don't need a 18 touch sequence. Now you can bring in other channels to extend out that like cadence. You can um, yeah, add some phone calls. I'm a huge fan of using other channels, by the way. People always assume that I'm like Mr. Anti cold call. And I'm like, yeah, there's to a degree. I don't pick up my phone very often, particularly for numbers that I don't know. But that said, um, when I was at Saster, I think it was probably the same day I met you. I picked up my phone at one of the events, and it was somebody cold calling me. And so, like, you think about it, like people have to pick up their phone at certain points in time. And so like you might get lucky and catch them in that moment. But it also just
Hmm.
adds a sense of humanity to the process, right? If I'm calling you and leaving a voicemail, I shoot you a note on LinkedIn, and I'm emailing you. Like, of course, it's me on the other end, right? It feels harder to automate. That's like you create more reciprocity, especially as you personalize across those different channels, those different touch points. It's like I really did do my research. Like I thought about what you're going through, and I think like very validly we can help. Um, which I do think there does need to be like a conversation in sales about like if there's no valid reason to reach out, like they're clearly not in the best possible position. Like, is there a different way to like work the account? Um, but the like long and short of it is like you really don't need that long of a cadence to generate conversation if you're approaching it correctly.
And I'm hearing it's because the bar is low. Too many people are doing the same thing. So actually standing out, and we probably both experiencing it. Like if a rep sends me a nice email, I'll often read them because I'm always looking for inspiration, seeing how people are mixing things up. And it really, and like you said, it does not take a lot to stand out in an inbox. Short subject, even that first line, you start to see it if you use Gmail, like for sure. Following up on LinkedIn with relevant piece of content, a voice message, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to ignore that human tone. Like someone has put in the extra mile compared to all the 20, 30 other messages that were automated with,
Yeah.
trumpet and our emoji, and you can just tell instantly. You can smell it from a mile away. So
Yeah,
it
I
sounds
agree.
like it's
I was,
not hard.
yeah, and sorry to cut you off. I was going to reference a series of emails that I've gotten from a sales rep at Vidyard. I recently did a episode of um, so we produce like a lot of video content and shows. So like I was recently doing one that we call Pardon the Outbound. It's an old take on the ESPN show Pardon the Interruption.
Mm.
The one of the episodes I showcased this rep at Vidyard, and like this rep has been personalizing emails to me for months now, and they are like I've responded, by the way, to like all of them. But just like thinking about that rep, they've sent me maybe 4 total emails. And like they've gotten responses to all of them because like each email is very well thought through. Now there's copywriting things that they could be doing better to get me more like excited about the opportunity. They could be like thinking about I'm not most likely to be in charge of certain things, and thusly I probably would have delegated that out to somebody else, right? Which like those are easy things to fix and adjust. Um, but like the core staple of like the research that rep is doing, the way that rep is thinking about like doing the outbound, that is something that is like inherently missing in most sales orgs.
And who do you think the onus falls on? Because with a tool like Lavender, you help massively turn an average rep into a top rep and really kind of think about their communication skills, which is such a cool one and I think overlooked a lot of the time in sales. But do you feel that it is leadership need to do a better job of educating their team on what actual personalization looks like, when to introduce it, how to do it? I think it's been forgotten.
Yeah, and the reason it's been forgotten is because most people in management came up in a time when volume was the competitive differentiator, and so I don't blame management, right? It's not management's it's management's fault and it's not management's fault, right? It's like it's hard to say do better if you don't know how to do better, right? And so one of the core sort of problems right now in the marketplace is you've got leadership that's been trained in the past to just like try to find the easy button. You've got this generative AI boom that's like offering a new shiny bullet, right? And then you've got like it's just like the incentives are sort of piling up to create like version 2 of like the cadence boom, right?
Mm.
Which is like personalized at scale, just click this button and like everything's done for you. But like think about if you are coming up in sales and you never take the time to like research the people that you're reaching out to, you never take the time to like truly get to know and understand them, like you're missing out on crucial development in your path to becoming an account executive. And so on leadership, it's like the onus is on them to actually set up these like processes to help people think about it more effectively. Because yeah, yes, AI is going to speed things up, it's going to make everything better, but like if you're missing the point, you're not going to develop as a rep to get better overall. And so the like the thing that I like to focus on with most of the sales works that we work with is like what's the process that you've set out when you know XYZ prospect is put in front of them for them to write an email, because right now it's usually like here's your template and there's a little bracket that says personalize, um, if they're personalizing, right? There's still, a lot of teams out there that are just like hit the automation button. But usually, if they're coming to us, they want to personalize emails. And so you see this like flow setup where there's just brackets that say personalize the email, and the reps are like, "What do I do?" Right? They have no idea what they're supposed to do with that, and so they end up like just slapping random things on top of templates, and it doesn't work. It creates this like blah message where you get like one thing and then there's this like weird juxtaposition where all of a sudden you're now being pitched, right? And that's not really what good messaging should look like. Your research should act as like a discovery process of like trying to seek to understand the current process of that org. And so when I put prospect in front of you, if you're trying to maximize both the quality of content, the development of your sales reps, and the volume of outbound going out the door, you should set up a workflow of you're going to go here, you're going to look there, you're going to go over this place. And with that, the idea is to understand what you're looking for, where you're looking for it, in what order you're going to go look for it, and knowing how to use all those pieces when they come together, which requires a lot of enablement, requires a lot of support. And we view what we've built in our tooling as ways to speed up the process, but like that thinking, what comes, like how those things come together, that still in a way needs to be on management, and it needs to be on the reps in their own path to becoming better sellers.
I like it.
There's something good that comes out of the friction, which sounds weird
Yeah,
for somebody who like runs a tech company to say, but it's like because like in reality, like as a product develops, like we will try to reduce friction in people's workflows. But there's something good about that struggle from learning that makes things down the line just a little bit better. So like I think about like my use of generative AI versus a net new rep, right? For me, generative AI slows me down. Like I end up just having to edit the crap out of whatever it produces, and it's just like a waste of my time. So I'd much rather write it myself, right? So I understand the value prop of like it'll generate something for you, and you don't have to worry about it. But the problem is you're putting a ceiling on your development and your growth because you're never figuring out how to go past that. And so, great, you found the easy button, but if management sets people up the right way, they've got such a higher trajectory that they can go to.
definitely. And it kind of touches on what you mentioned earlier about this, the bar always changing as well. If you're relying more and more on AI, you're doing what everyone else is doing, and you're not really thinking outside the box, taking a step back, thinking how to stand out, which is definitely important these days. So it sounds like as well, it's not just about linking up with leadership and thinking about what is actual personalization, but it is also a case of continuously iterating, trying things that are different and not just relying on one tactic, apply all.
Yeah, this is actually when we were in the early days of Lavender and we were picking who we wanted to have as advisors to the company. Kyle Coleman immediately comes to mind as you're talking about this because I think about Kyle's past. Kyle Coleman, he's SVP of marketing now at Clary. Um, he posts a lot on LinkedIn as well, but his brain when it comes to like thinking about outbound, he was pushing his team to personalize emails well before it was like the cool thing to do, right? It was way before. And part of that came from his experience as a buyer, but another part of it came from him just looking at the market and being like, if everyone's going to do that, I should do the other thing so that my emails don't get trashed, right? It's worked out for his team. They do great. Their clients Lavender, they write fantastic emails. They've got double digit responses, right? And you see all these folks being like, I got 5% reply rates. I'm like, you, probably got a bunch of people saying, leave me alone. But at the same time, like, there's a way higher ceiling that you could strive towards if you
Mm.
just approach the outbound the right way. But to your point, also approached it in a different way to what's the hot new easy button? What's the thoughtful approach to being effective?
Biocentric.
Yeah. It's it's buyer first. It's this idea of effective over efficient. Because efficient is very seller centric, but effective is very buyer centric.
There's me taking notes. Love that phrase. Always got a pen in hand for these because it's just so many, yeah, nuggets of gold. We've touched a lot on personalization in outreach, and I know something that you're quite keen on at the moment is the sales journey doesn't stop there, especially for the buyer. That's
Yeah.
like the foot in the door. You created awareness. Okay, you caught my attention. Let's chat. How do you treat personalization beyond that first touch point and once you've captured their attention?
Yeah. There's a lot to that. So if I think about the because like if you think about most people's mindset when it comes to the initial outbound, they think of it as this conversion point, which like if you've got that like conversion focused mindset, like you're going to be like, okay, I send them the email, they respond, they go to the meeting. But in reality, like it's not always the case, right? I'm not always ready for a meeting. I'm not thinking about this. And like the way buyers are moving, like I know my schedule. I can't imagine like if we were, $100 million company and somebody was asking for 30 minutes of my time just off of a cold meet email. Right. And so like you think about this like approach that people have to it where like sales reps are almost afraid to have a conversation in the inbox. And so like one of the things that I think people have to get out of the mindset of is like email is about conversation, not conversion. And it's not to say like I want to sit there and chit chat with a sales rep on like my inbox all day, right? My emails are just too busy. But like you have to start dialogue in order to move it to a conversion, which I think is fundamentally challenging to a lot of sellers. Um, because, as I mentioned, right, it's sort of like, here's my template of like what we do. Do you want to buy it? Right. And in reality, like, yeah, hey, I'm seeing the following things. Makes me think this is going on, but like, am I off? And like, thinking this following thing's a priority, right? You're like, no, we're really focused on XYZ. You're like, oh, interesting, right? Like having that conversation via email, right, sets you up to get the meeting, but like people are viewing the like initial message as this like conversion point, which gets to this like larger idea that like the prospecting and the discovery are one and the same, right? Like you really don't need a 15-minute discovery call if you're doing effective prospecting because you don't have to have that weird alignment phone call where you're like, okay, here's what you do, here's what we do, and like, where do the things come together so that we can work together, right? Like, we've all been on that call and it's miserable because we spend 10 minutes talking about ourselves and we spend 10 minutes listening to the other person talk about themselves. And then there's like 5 minutes left to like seek alignment and then next steps, right? And then you wonder why your sales process is getting dragged out. Um, it's just like to me, I think of that as like bonkers as far as like you could do the upfront work and save everybody a boatload of time by giving everyone a very specific direction on where you want the conversation to go once you have the conversation.
Yeah, I think sales has become way too transactional. Like everyone's trying to fit the buyer into our process, our playbook, how we do things. We need to adapt to the buyer. The buyer journey has become far more digital, as we're all seeing. Like the concept of collaborating, engaging asynchronously,
Yeah.
it's like blowing people's minds. But it's like what we're all doing day to day. People are spending way less time on calls and quick demos and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it assumes that the buyer's job is to buy, right? It's not their job. Their job is to do whatever it is that their job is. And buying is like a small, small, small fraction of what that job is. And if they spend too much time buying, like they're not gonna have a job very long. So like this is where a lot of like um, my notes on like discovery intersect as well with like multi-threading and getting like into multiple conversations across the account to create that like really structured unique point of view, right? It's this like really popular topic right now of multi-threading, and like everyone knows it's important but nobody really talks about tactically what to
yeah,
do. Right? And there's like two really core elements to what makes for good like outbound in that situation. One, it's like people have zero concept for how to like message to people below the line. This invisible, magical like line of like people up here make decisions, people down here are just influence it, right?
yeah,
Um, which I think is way more nebulous than people realize, because the people down here have way more influence than they ever have.
Mm.
But yeah, because nobody wants to spend on something that no one's going to use. But then the other part is like once they have conversations down here, they don't realize how important it is to keep people up here informed, right? And so it's just like a lot of missing pieces in the tactical tool belt for sellers right now. Um, And so I try to talk about these things a good bit, right? It's like, hey, if you're talking below the line, you're not selling anymore. Like you're like a reporter, right? You're just trying to help them. And you're also trying to like seek and find information so that you can have that more pointed conversation above the line, right? You're not going to get information without helping somebody on the other end and helping them authentically, not like this like transactional version of help. Like, hey, here's a blog article. Can you tell me what your tech stack is, right? It's like, hey, I see these things going on, and yeah, makes me think this is probably a priority. Are you using tools like X, Y, and Z to do it? If so, here's like a really helpful blog article I found to like go get that done in that situation, right? That's being helpful while seeking information.
Mm.
Um, so like, yeah, you're gonna have to end up personalizing below the line just as much as you are above the line. Problem is, people are taking above the line tactics and being like, "Hey, yeah, have you thought about how great it would be if you had this tool belt?" And like people are like, "I don't have buying authority. Leave me alone." Right?
Yeah.
It's like yeah. Then everybody's just like, cold emails are terrible and I hate them. Um,
We noticed X in your annual report. We can help drive this. Is that? I didn't know we had an annual report.
yeah, exactly. I haven't ever read that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
I think as well, like not enough salespeople realize that it's very difficult in outreach to land. Like, there's always the timing, the talk of making it relevant and timely. But to actually get in front of someone and land in the midst of them exploring a project. And what I mean by that is they're currently looking to solve that problem, that pain, and all of those words that we always go through. Um, and quite often, what you'll be faced with is creating more of a conversation. So, is it a project? Is it a conversation? But you can nurture a conversation into a project. But I think salespeople think that as soon as they get a reply, that company are therefore looking to buy your solution. Like, there's interest, they're doing this, they're excited, happy is. Where a lot of the
yeah.
time we need to nurture that conversation and get in front of other people and understand, like, is there a problem to be solved?
Yeah, which that in of itself generates challenges for sellers because like now they're holding on to these accounts that like are going to take longer, which means they're eating up more of their time. So they just got to get better about like managing um, reminders, managing tasks, and making sure that they stay on top of like reaching out to those folks over the long haul. Um, and also like recognizing when an account's just not ready and being okay with letting go of it.
Yeah, not enough of that. Awesome. I know we're at time. I was meant to do a quick couple of icebreaker questions at the start, but the first is your favorite musician.
My favorite musician. Um, right now, it's this guy Zach Bryan. Very like Americana, like country. It's good stuff.
Have to check it out. Have to check it out. Nice. And favorite app or software or tool
Oh man,
outside of Lavender?
outside of Lavender, of course, of course. Let's see. My favorite software application. Um, Probably have to go with. I mean, probably have to go with. Ooh, there's a few because like there's one that I'm a big fan of. Superhuman's mobile app, right? So like on desktop, I'm using Gmail to stick within our own product, but Superhuman's mobile app has like helped me sort of like stay on top of email really well. And it's a really clean interface. Big fan of like how they think. Um, the other one, yeah, gotta give a shout out to LinkedIn for all it's done for me. So that would be that's my top favorite. Even with all the bugs, all the disasters that it is, yeah, gotta be number one.
Nice. It's almost like you know the third and final icebreaker, which is if you had to give a shout out to anyone else on LinkedIn or that you'd want to see on a show or an up and coming creator because you're a great voice on LinkedIn, who would you be giving a call out to?
Oh man, I'd say Kyle Say, but I don't know if Jen Allen would ever forgive me. So I'll go with Julia Carter. She's an AE out of New York, and I think she's taken a really unique approach to creating content that's fun, engaging, sassy, in all the right ways.
Nice. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure. It's been long overdue and really enjoyed having you on. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it, Roy.